Hello, good evening, and welcome to the India book launch of Manish Srivastava's latest book, Midnight Journey of a Seed. Manish Srivastava is a poet, life coach, and facilitator of societal transformation. He works with leaders across business, government, UN, and civil society to co design social innovation labs. He integrates poetry, contemplative art, and systems thinking in his work. He has authored two books. Welcome to the show, Manish.
Thank you so much, Geetica. It's so wonderful to be with you and be part of this launch.
Very much, and we are also equally excited to be a part of this launch, and we are happy to host this India book launch of your book. So starting with the first question about your book Midnight Journey of a Seed is being launched today. How long has been the journey of the book, and when did you begin?
That's a great question. In fact, it feels like a decade, although it was only 2 years back when the pandemic was first announced. And that was the time when my wife and I were promoting my first book. We were traveling for that, and suddenly there was a severe lockdown, and we could not travel anymore. And I remember, which I think we all will recall, very little was known about the pandemic at that stage, and there was intense trauma, terror, suffering. But before we could overcome our own suffering, migrant crisis happened, and that brought the stories of collective suffering. And so, while this time when I was also, as you just said, my work also involved helping people across the sectors, and we both of us, me and my wife, jumped into helping migrant laborers in different ways. But at that time, I developed a practice early in the pandemic, and my practice was to wake up before sunrise, sit in front of the sun, waiting for it to rise, meditate, and notice what emotions are alive within my body. What are the stories that I heard yesterday from people on the field, or my neighbors, or my family? And then I translated that into poetry or art or body movement. And I was just doing it as my personal journaling practice till came a moment I realized that I started seeing that in these stories, there was also a story of human resilience, not just suffering. And so I'm going to, if it is okay with you, read one of the poems that I wrote, because that was the beginning of the book. That's how the book started.
Definitely, definitely. Go ahead.
So this is the poem titled Midnight Journey of a Seed. This is the title poem. The seed had no choice. When she was separated, lost, tossed, and buried below the dark earth alone. But somewhere in the middle of the night, she felt she had to choose to harden up and deny the journey so painful, or to let the journey crack open her shell and give birth to new life. And so, just like the seed, I felt we all had this moment of choice to let this trauma, suffering, all that we are going through in the pandemic, to just carry on with that in some way, or transform that into something new, into a learning, into a capacity which will help us in other crises in future. And I felt this is our journey as a seed. And that's the title, and that's how this book came into being, Kitika.
That's true. We always have choices, but it's important how we choose and what we choose at what time. Very good. Okay, so moving on to the next question. You talk about there being learning from every crisis. What was your learning and how did you decide to integrate poetry with art and contemplative practices?
So I think I partly shared that how I started integrating poetry. But I want to share one thing, that during this crisis, I also attended a program by Thomas Hubel on collective trauma healing. And and he talked about, just like Holocaust or partition, pandemic itself is a collective trauma that we all have gone through, especially for those who suffered most, especially in the second wave. And so when we go through any crisis, our system shuts down, our mental, physical system shuts down because it's too much to handle. And then we want to get on with life, just like now. Third wave is over, let's get on with life. But the parts of us that were lost, that felt the pain, about loss, about fear. All of that keeps running like apps, uh, phone apps in the background. They keep drawing the system's energy. And that comes in the way to fully live our potential. So, what contemplative art, coming back to your question, what art, what poetry, what writing, what it does is it gently opens the app again, reduces the clutter, and then shows us a way to heal. And in fact, I have a small story here and a poem also, to maybe some reading from the book, to make this point, that how do we learn and how do we transform a crisis into hope? How poetry transforms crisis into hope. So many of us, especially in the second wave, lost people around us. And I lost a very dear friend, and it was too much for me to handle. So as a poet, what do? I wrote about it in one of my morning meditation, and this I wrote this poem, which was titled "How Do You Mourn the Loss of a Friend?" How do you mourn the loss of a friend? I'm just going to read few lines from it. It's a long
Sure.
poem, and I read this
Sure.
poem as I was writing. I read this poem in a gathering of around 150 people who had gathered. This was in We lost her on 20th July, so in the middle of the second wave. I read this poem in this remembrance gathering, and how it activated, how it helped others to meet their losses, and a healing began, and this mourning transforms into hope. So let's read few lines. How do you mourn loss of a friend? What do you do when you suddenly realize that your most trusted co-traveler will never show up again? They were like that favorite tea shop where you found warmth in your lonely moments. The stuff that's often unspeakable with family was processed in this sacred space with a friend. How do you mourn such a loss? The happy corner of your favorite tea stall. I truly don't know how to mourn the loss of a friend, or if I should even do that. No last rites teach us how to honor the sacred moments that can no longer be co created. A part has crossed to the other realm, but the other still lives within me. How can I declare it dead? How selfish would that be? To assume that my friend does not have a parallel journey, for she would also visit those tea stalls, empty walls, and war fields. They are the portals to our friendship. I will go there as often as we usually did, till one day the portal itself dissolves in me. And who knows, a new soul shows up, as broken, battered, or lost as I was. Maybe now it's my turn to be a friend like the one I just lost.
Yes, very good. Very impressive. And so deep in the meanings you have written, and actual emotions are there in everything. Very nice. Okay, moving on to the next question. What was your response to the resilience you saw around you during the pandemic? When a person writes, how can they ensure that their innermost feelings are coherent for the reader?
Another great question, Geetika. Beautiful questions you are choosing. And let me answer the second part of the question first. And as you are a writer yourself, and as you relate to many writers, they say that our first drafts are never written for the audience; they're written for self. And so the first is our coherence, my coherence with myself and the phenomena that I'm experiencing. If it is a loss of a friend, or it is a joy of a child doing something, because this book has all emotions that we went through, and it transforms them into something more powerful. So whatever I experience as a poet, as a writer, what is my integrity and coherence with that and to myself? And when we do that, that's what is Aham Brahmasmi in a way. I become the world that I'm experiencing. In fact, I got to get out of that experience, which means my ego needs to get out so I can fully feel it as a poet, as a medium. And this first time I realized in my previous book, Trading Armor for a Flower, that book was, to my surprise, poems were translated to Hebrew and Spanish. And people in Chile or Israel, they were saying, one woman said, "This is my reality." One soldier from Israel said, he used that in a film. He made a film on one of the poems. He said, "This is me." And at that moment, I had to humbly let go, because I realized my poems, right, even in this book, I hope they are only a doorway. They are a doorway which opens for you to meet your own self. And that's when you ask this question, that's when the resonance takes place. That's when the coherence takes place, because now you are meeting your own self. And my hope is that each poem here becomes a doorway for you to meet yourself. Does that help? I have still not answered the first part of the question, that
Yeah.
about the resilience. Yeah, and again, as I was looking at this, I thought maybe again stories are better than gyan. So let me tell you
People
a story.
relate to stories.
Exactly, exactly. And I think this is a story about the migrant crisis, that how I saw that crisis. When that happened, I was heartbroken, like many of us. I felt I'm locked in this beautiful castle of mine, and there are my brothers and sisters walking on the road. And I wanted to do something about it. And as I started connecting with the stories and speaking to people and connecting with them, it gave birth to a poem. And more than a poem, this is a narrative. This is an invitation to walk with the migrant laborer who is walking on the road. And again, I think I'm going to just read some parts of it. This poem actually was circulated widely on social media, and it led to gatherings, Zoom gatherings, and our question: how do we help create resilience? Because one thing, my friend Samta Vashist says, Dr. Samta Vashist, that resilience cannot be created just for one person. A tree cannot be happy if the forest is not. And so, how can I be resilient if my migrant brothers and sisters are not? How can I be resilient if my parents and my wife and my son are not? So resilience is a collective journey, and this pandemic actually revealed that it was a very tough lesson that you cannot alone be happy. And so this poem, which invites us, let's walk with the migrant laborer for a while. A father in late 20s walking with his bags and scars left over pride, balancing his child and his hope for survival on his shoulders. And then it goes on and on to take us. And then it says, let's walk with the woman, catching up to her husband, her steps larger than her frame, carrying a bag on her left arm and a toddler on the right. So the poem actually takes you in the story. But this, when it takes you to the child, which I still shudder to read, I was considering should I read or not because it's raw. But let's read it because it's in the service of the book and to everyone who is here. If you could stay a little longer, walk beside the child for a while. If you could stay a little longer, walk with the child, migrant's child, walk with the child for a while. Look into his innocent eyes, wondering quietly why his school, his playground, his safe home was snatched from him overnight. Why his parents chose to walk this long path, why his stomach rumbles so much, why he can't ask for food, why no one is wiping his tears. A soul unknowingly born in this world, so broken and so inhuman. And
So it's yes.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you continue.
So this one poem, you see how it opens the heart. That's what poetry, and that's what this book would do for you. It guides us to, it takes us through those aspects which we quickly rushed away from because it was too much. But maybe this is a moment to go back and connect with that again, as Thomas Hubel says. We need to bring our struggles back and gently hold it, gently hold. So this kind of opens up our heart and creates a new kind of leadership, a compassionate action. Because this one poem led to a theater performance. It was presented at global forum with more than 1,000 plus people. It led to fund generation, and then to projects, and it inspired me and some of us to transform our relation with urban poor forever. We have led to so many enterprises after that. So I think it's not my poem. This is a poem of the child. And likewise, every single poem, some about struggle, some about hope, some about joy, each one is
Yes.
bringing us that kind of opening that window into our heart. I hope
Because
this
each,
helps.
yeah,
Yeah,
because each poem is out of a story which you have seen yourself and been through, so it is like expressive in every way. So whoever reads or whoever reads this in forum also, they are connecting with it because they've all seen in some or the other way throughout these 2 years. So it is reaching millions of hearts. Okay, so
thank you.
coming to the next one, how can the average reader read or use the book? Are you planning to interact with readers so that they can make full use of the concepts that you present?
Absolutely. And maybe I'll step back to just explain the making of the book and structure of the book. Then we can see how we can best use. So first, there are poems, but this is more than one third of the book is stories, anecdotes. So about people. So just like the story I told you, the story is there in the book. So there are stories and stories of hope and joy, stories of how children are transforming this crisis, stories of how people are helping each other. So all different stories, poems, and practices. I have been gathering them over the 2 years, and then at one stage I had around 80 of them, and I wondered now what. And so I slept with them. I literally laid, printed, and put them on the bed, and I slept with them. And then one day I woke up with this whole kind of a organization that what would organize it together. And I had this image of a warrior king. So the book is organized at three levels. First are these stories and poems, stories, and practices. The second, it is organized into 10 chapters, which takes you through a narrative poem and a narrative story, which runs through. It's like a little thread that runs through all the 10 chapters and tells the story that we all went through. It's a story of a warrior king in a way who is negotiating with a crisis and trying to transform it into something creative, just like each one of us. That warrior king is and queen is each one of us. So that's the second level of organizing. And then I further organize these 10 chapters into four phases of resilience. And these primarily are resourcing our gifts when the crisis hits us, any crisis, not just this pandemic, resourcing our gifts, reconciling with our wounds and grieving, reviving our inner love and joy, and regenerating a new future. So these are three levels of organizing, and therefore you can use this book. Coming to your question, Geetika, you can use this book by treating it at three levels. You can treat it as a map, so and you can just quickly scan through the four phases that I just mentioned and see where you are. Are you do you need to develop more resources? Do you need more revival? Where you are in your whichever whatever the challenge is, where you are. And there are practices, contemplative practices given. So that's one. You can treat it as a map. You can read the book from end to end, which is what is this warrior story. You can read it end to end, dipping into poems, and wherever you feel like you can go deeper and then experience the whole narrative, which you said before our call, that kind of makes you relive the journey and generates hope. So that's the second. And the third is you can read this book like a tarot card, which is you pick this up, open any page, and let the poem or let the story find you, the one that matters most to you. And right now, the one that for me is the alchemist in my basement. So, whatever that means, then read it and see how that story talks to you. So, this is the way I feel this book would uh, hopefully help
To the
everyone.
readers.
And there
Yeah.
are already 8 wonderful people who have reviewed the book,
Talked about the book.
they've written recommendations like Ajay Chopra, Master Chef, or Otto Scharmer, who's a professor at MIT. So all these people, wonderful people, have written, and they gave me little hope because they said that they felt like reading end to end, and they felt like deeping diaper. And each poem opens some aspects of our life in some curious ways. So that's about the book. Anything else on your mind? You had another question, I think, which was how are you
Uh,
planning to engage, right?
if you want to talk more about your book and like where is it available, how people can reach it, buy it, and what should readers be expecting exactly from it?
Yes. So let's start with what you should be expecting. You should expect to
Why
meet.
should people buy this book?
Yes. Why should you buy this? The book is available on Amazon India right now, and within a week it would be available on all the Amazon global sites as well as on Kindle. So right now it is available on Amazon India and on the Notion Press website. So the link for the Amazon India is
In the
already given.
comments.
You can go and check it out. Now, why you should read this book? That's always a difficult question. You have to find your own answer. Maybe something in our conversation connected. But one thing I will say: what is the invitation? My invitation to you, in some way, this book is a love letter. This is a love letter from my inner self to yours. I have opened windows of my heart, as I said. And I hope that this opens windows of your heart to revisit, to help you transform your challenges into hope, into resilience. And and that is the primary service that this book is doing through its poems, stories, and practices. And one thing that I'm going to offer, because for me, this book is, as I said, from learning from previous experience, book is a doorway for us to enter into our healing and resilience journey. It gives you a map also. It gives you a map, and it allows you to choose your own map, make your own map. How do I transform my own challenges and go that way? So one thing that I'm going to do, Geetika, is I have already announced before the book. I announced monthly poetry dialogue circles for healing and resilience, and this is on first Monday of every month. Um, I think I should. I have not prepared the link, but you can visit my blog, which is sacredwell.in, where you will find about these circles. And I think what we will do every first Monday of the month, at least for 6 months, and then we may continue. We will do exactly what I shared with you. We will read poems, we will reflect on our journey, we'll celebrate your resilience or let you speak about your challenges, because this is what the world needs. And then we will create new poetry. And I'm also a facilitator of social presencing theater, which has helped me write the book. So we will create embodiment, we'll create body gestures which will allow us to fully express what we are going through, and see it as a work of art. We can transform our wounds into work of art, and that's the promise this book brings. So I hope you enjoyed diving into it. um,
Yes.
yes, makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, the book looks very promising, and the story behind writing each and every poem and the stories you have added combined in this book, and it all looks very promising. Very best wishes to you. It becomes a bestseller and helps the society in every way. The intention you want to reach the people because of this book. So that was all from Manish Srivastava today. Thank you very much for joining in. Thank you, Manish. Good night and bye bye.
Thank you everyone for joining in. Goodbye.